Good morning, campers. Woke Radio Camp Half-Let, a Percy Jackson Reelong podcast. I am your host, Zach.
And I'm B.
And this week, we read Chapter 4 of Battle of the Labyrinth. Annabeth breaks the rules. She's a loose cannon cop. She isn't going by the book. She's doing her own rules. Oh, no!
And she's breaking the rule of bringing another person on a quest that might lead to murder. Or maybe not murder. Might just be death. You know, not specifically murder.
Rule number 1, there are no rules. Rule number 2, please take your shoes off when you enter my house, please.
Please take your shoes off when you enter the labyrinth.
Or you have weird synth music and you have weird David Bowie aspects. I gotta get off this labyrinth thing because I'm gonna be running out of jokes very quickly the second they get into this labyrinth.
For a second I was incredibly confused as to why you brought up David Bowie, and then I remembered.
Jareth and his tight pants.
We could talk about that forever. In fact, we have. We are in a labyrinth of our own making in some ways.
Oh, no. But yeah, I really did enjoy this chapter a lot. It had some different elements that I was normally accustomed to for these books because Percy's somewhat self-aware at this point of what a quest is like.
Yeah, I did notice that in this chapter. He seemed a little bit more, what's the word, prescient. He wasn't just sort of huh? What's happening? He kind of was piecing things together in a way that a person who pays attention would.
He's more checking his watch, come on guys, it's time to go. I already know the song and dance. Come on, Annabeth, can you get your prophecy already? Okay, we're ready to go? You got your snacks? Okay, well let's all hit the road. And they do the Wizard of Oz, they all lock arms together and skip towards the labyrinth.
And then they immediately die. Yeah, I found this chapter to be a nice break from what we've had so far, I guess, in this book. I feel a lot of the writing and plotting I haven't been the biggest fan of, and finally I think we're getting to the meat of what's actually going to happen in the plot, and I think the characterization feels a little bit more believable, I guess. Even Percy, he doesn't seem conveniently stupid. He's paying attention to what's happening. He's asking the right questions, which we've talked about before as he's not necessarily a self-insert character, but he is sort of playing the role of, the audience in the sense that he knows less than most campers, but is gradually learning along with us about how this world works, basically. And I think sometimes, especially in the past 2 books, it feels like he's not catching up as fast as the readers are, where you're why aren't you asking these questions or whatever. Well, I think this chapter, it felt he was asking the questions that you would ask in that scenario, asking Annabeth, oh, what did the prophecy say? Or kind of piecing together some of the stuff with Quintus and all of that. It didn't feel like he was just sort of bumbling and completely confused, or just kind of relenting to the fact that, oh, we got interrupted. I guess we can't follow up on that thing that I have a question about. He keeps pressing, and that's what I would do in that scenario.
Yes, especially when they've established that, we're 4 books in, that Percy kind of gets the gist of how the quests work. And finally, we've gotten to the point of these books where we don't have to keep explaining things. Percy Jackson doesn't have a string attached to him. It's come hither, young child, let me explain everything to you. It's a lot like Harry Potter and how the first 4 books are kind of Harry Potter's an idiot and doesn't know anything, but then there's this weird switch with the 5th book where he suddenly knows everything. And I kind of miss the aspects of Harry Potter where he's this reminds me of my old PlayStation, or there's things he's trying to correlate with Muggle things, but now that he's kind of integrated into the wizarding world.
No, I think Percy actually feels very half and half, not to make a pun about half-bloods, but he definitely does still feel connected to normal teenage human culture a lot of the time, which I think maybe that might have something to do with why sometimes Rick Riordan portrays him as a little bit dumb and not as connected to the ancient Greek stuff, because that makes him a little bit less relatable to maybe the target audience of these books. But also you have to keep in mind oh, we're reading along with you. We're learning all the things that you would be learning. So sometimes it feels almost less relatable how little he knows. Why isn't he piecing this together? So it does feel a little bit cathartic to finally have him be oh yeah, the guy who made the labyrinth, Daedalus, right? I had a vision about him. He's putting the pieces together in a way that is satisfying, as opposed to him just being huh, what? I don't know anything about ancient Greece. You can't do that anymore. You've been at camp for several years now.
See, that's kind of like the thing when it comes to like talking about these books with we've already established like 1 to 4 books, is that you kind of need that kind of jump because without it, things go a little crazy and like cuckoo bananas. Because like when it comes to series, you need to have that push. And that's why I like this chapter a lot, is because Percy is so used to doing all the questing and going in the Sea of Monsters and going to DC and going through the Titan's Curse. Finally, we've gotten to the point of where even like there's a part where he's talking to Quintus and he hands him an item and he's like, I've already did this before with Luke where he handed me an item and terrible things are going to happen, which is great because I like when you have characters that are almost like self-aware enough to like have a joke where if you look at, I'm guessing, and once again, I've always assumed that Rick Riordan is kind of an outliner here, is that he's finally gotten to the point of where the training wheels are off and he can finally start talking about his things. I'm thinking this is where like all the editor's notes kind of start to become more sparse and he just like has fun with it because characters are finally acting like themselves, because the last 3 chapters have been like, kind of feels like the knockoff brand of cereal. Like it kind of tastes like the original thing. Like if you don't like look at the box.
Right. Like they're just going through the motions of kind of what their characters would do, but like it doesn't feel genuine to what we know about them, or like it doesn't call back to the growth that we've seen them go through in the past few books. So like, why are they acting this way? I mean, we were joking about that, the hormones of Annabeth or whatever. Like that was even like a meme on the Twitter of like about how just like everything can be explained away by her hormones or whatever. Like why are these characters acting this way? Like no, there's more to it than hormones. Like they would not be acting so weird around each other. What is happening?
Well, yeah, and also, like I said before, my theory is that all the editor's notes kind of like become more sparse here, and this is where Rick Riordan kind of actually can like stretch a little bit and really start to get that pace, because they kind of like run towards the labyrinth in a way that actually works because Percy feels like himself. Annabeth is kind of in her element. She's smart, but also can be vulnerable because she gets the prophecy and she doesn't want to quite tell everyone it all that much. And then we even have things with Clarice where we realize, she is like this tough girl. But then we have this like tragedy that kind of happens that we find out, which, Clarice is pretty much the same as we've always had with like, she has like the tough girl appearance, but she's the brute with the heart of gold.
Yeah, which we get more of in this chapter for sure. I definitely feel like this chapter, unlike the first few, it gets to a certain, it makes us feel lived in the world where it calls back to stuff that has happened before, but not in a way as if it's explaining it to you for the first time, sort of. Like, I'm trying to think of an example, like the Luke thing, like you were just talking about how, when Quintus gives him that gift of the whistle for his hellhound, we are thinking probably, oh wait, I don't really trust this guy. And also he just had this conversation with Juniper about how he shouldn't trust Quintus. And then he makes the connection that the reader would, which is, wait a second, Luke gave me a gift when I first went on a quest in the first book, and then that ended up trying to kill him. So it was a part of his duplicitousness, like he was seeming friendly, but actually it was a part of his plan to like thwart him. And we're thinking of that as readers, and it was very satisfying for Percy to like acknowledge that internally. And not in a way where it's like, remember when Luke did this? It was him puzzling it out in his own brain. Like it didn't feel stilted or weird that he was calling back to that. It made sense that he was calling back to that.
See, this is why I'm going to use Star Wars for an example here, is that in the original Star Wars,
really? You're going to use Star Wars for an example? That's never happened on this podcast.
No, it's shocking. It's surprising. But the one thing that I love about Star Wars 1977 is that it's like this lived-in universe where like things look rusted and junky and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to the prequels and everything's like super bright and shiny. It just like burns your eyes. And then you get to Han Solo, which is like the in-between, and it's still like that where it's bright and shiny and things are like nice, like the Millennium Falcon's like pristine. And then you see it like less than 10 years later and it's like rusted, and like I don't even want to know what Chewie and Han did in the Millennium Falcon because it's like gross
to
and
make
disgusting.
It look that way.
Yeah, to make it look that way because there's like brown everywhere. And it's like, wait a second, this was all white like 5 years ago. Oh my God. But yeah, it's even
Chewie
like
is a dog person, so we have to keep that in mind.
But then you just have like one of those gigantic like hair roller things you have for your dogs. You just like wipe it over the walls. Like, oh man, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's how infomercials look in like that universe. It just like picks the Chewie hair right up.
When you said infomercials, I'm imagining like Han Solo, like Harrison Ford, like being like an infomercial actor that's like trying to like carry things like a bowl, and, like drops it.
He's like Vince Offer talking about the shticky.
I was not even talking about the sticky, but like my favorite is like white people in infomercials where like they can't do anything right. Like that's my favorite.
Oh, so it's like in black and white. He's like, do you ever try to fly your spaceship and you just crash into a wall?
Yeah, exactly like that. Or like, have you ever made intergalactic space chili before? And like he has like the bowl and like throws it on the wall. Whoops, that's not how you eat it. Well, there's a new way of eating it.
Wait, why did we bring up Star Wars again?
I have no clue. Oh, because Galaxy's Edge just opened up, so everyone's talking about Star Wars.
Oh, you were talking about like lived in
Yeah.
world stuff, I think. That's why it came up, right?
Yes, that's exactly the reason why it came up. But like going back to that, because I can get easily distracted about it, is that you have things that have like echo from the past, because it's not like, I'll give an example, like a Goosebumps book where like kind of each book resets itself because it's a different universe. They're not technically connected.
Right, it just comes back
Yes.
to the beginning. Yeah.
Whereas, you know, we have a series so they can actually finally do like throwback references or things from the past that work because we have this thing of the past, not like Percy Jackson wakes up and everything's the same like Groundhog's Day.
Right, or like, yeah, or like a cartoon, sort of like the way that no matter what happens in an episode of a cartoon, in a way, everything kind of resets at the end, even if there is some sort of character growth. Like, it doesn't matter, like their dynamics stay pretty much the same. And sometimes it feels that way when reading the series, but I found this chapter particularly satisfying because it felt like the characterization was like consistent with what we knew, but also ever evolving with different circumstances. Like there was the moment where Annabeth is sort of piecing together that it would have been Luke who knew about the entrance to the labyrinth, and she's sort of half freaked out by this and also half like impressed in a way because she still has that affection towards him, but it's done in a subtle way where you're like, oh, okay, she would talk about Luke in that way.
She would do all this stuff.
Yeah. And it feels believable that she would talk about him in that way, but it wouldn't be so like, and isn't Luke great? Like, it's not done in like an obnoxious way where they're trying to like make it obvious that she used to be close with him. It's done more internally in Percy's inner monologue where he's thinking, oh, that's why she says it that way. It's because I know the context of how she knows Luke and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's explained just enough without it being like, and anyway, you know how Luke and Annabeth and also Talia used to know each other before Luke got all like ancient Greek neo-Nazi or whatever he's supposed to be.
See, there was some of that in this chapter, but it was like almost to the point of where it was subtle because you still needed to drop some of that stuff. But that's okay because a lot of it's still now finally implied, which is great because we're about 3 chapters in. And by this point, kids are like mauling at the walls trying to finish this book faster and faster.
Yeah, because they just want them to finally freaking get into the labyrinth, even though it's horrifying. And so actually this chapter addresses a lot of the complaints we've had before, because not only does it address some of the characterization stuff where it feels a little bit more believable, like they're acting like themselves again, but also it starts to get into the plot more about the labyrinth. It feels like we're picking up, like we get to what's happening with Annabeth and the Oracle and what the prophecy says. We get to talk a little bit about what happened with, what's his name, Chris Rodriguez, and then we also get like some more interesting characterization from Clarice. Well, before, remember, we were kind of talking about how it's weird that like Percy and her sort of have like a friendship-ish thing going on in Sea of Monsters where they don't care. I don't know, it's complicated, but like she doesn't hate him the way that she hates him in the first book after the events of the second book. And it feels a little bit reset in the beginning of this one where you're like, oh, wait, why is she being such a jerk again to him? And this kind of develops more of her like soft side again. Like, oh, we get to see her interacting with Chris Rodriguez. We talk about like the interaction that she had when she found him coming out of the labyrinth, the way that he is. And then that's another complaint we had too, was that because Percy is a bit of a flippant idiot sometimes, the way he talks about him, the Chris is like very, dismissive and is like, oh, a crazy guy in a labyrinth. What happened with that? And it seems kind of played for laughs. Well, in this chapter, it's actually very serious. Like they're in the basement and they're talking and Percy overhears and goes, oh no. Like, yeah, there's a lot of things that are addressed.
Let's get to that because I feel like we'll have plenty of time to talk about it. Let's kind of like ease into this chapter a little bit. And by easing in, we start off with a dream sequence. Doo-doot, doo-doot, doo-doot. I love how it opens up with like, so Chiron was like, you guys should like sleep on it.
Like, go to sleep.
Yep. Hey, everybody, the camp's going to be destroyed. Well, everyone, time for lights out. Hope you guys get Betty by Annabeth. You should get into your jammy jams.
I like Percy's self-awareness sometimes where he, like, points out the absurdity of the world that he's living in. The fact that Chiron says, go to sleep, and then basically Percy says...
No. Pretty much.
Which was like, kind of like, hey, your life's in mortal danger, sleep tight. It was hard to fall asleep. Like, yeah, like that's what you would be thinking in that scenario.
Well, that's also default Percy being sarcastic because that is just in character for Percy Jackson, where he sees something, he says to the reader, yeah, this is kind of stupid, and here's the reason why, because every time I go to sleep, I have these horrible, horrible nightmares, which this one is completely different from the rest we've had because a lot of them have been with Luke. It's very similar to what happened with Zoe in the last book, with how Percy Jackson has this flashback scene of like ancient Greece, and he sees Daedalus.
Right, it's not current.
So it's not really current because we have Daedalus, and he is kind of captured. It's a lot like ancient mythology. I wonder what myth this is being based off of.
Yeah, and also his son, which I don't...
It's unnamed.
...remember who Daedalus's son is... Isn't Daedalus' son Icarus?
Well...
You can't answer that. If you answer that, then it's a spoiler, right? Because in which case, I think, is Daedalus the one who, like, builds the wings that fly too close to the sun? Is that a thing? Am I remembering that right? Something has been unearthed of my memory of Greek mythology that I vaguely learned in 6th grade. Like, do I know what's happening, sort of? I mean, and especially with, like, the indication of, oh, there's, like, an open... area in the prison in this vision that Percy has. So, like, is that what happened? Did he build wings to escape? I don't know. Am I confusing myself?
I will tell you this, B. What happens when you have the world's greatest inventor and a son who's more dear to life than you would imagine?
He invents something to escape. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's why I was thinking, like, oh, it might be the same person that I'm thinking of, but if I'm wrong, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're fine. I'm not going to tell you. It's like, when it comes to mythology, because it might be spoilery.
You can't tell me yet, because it's spoiler. This is the thing, is like, it's good that I don't know too much about mythology, because I feel like if I knew more about that myth, then I might have a clearer idea of what was happening in the plot in a way that's spoilery, but I don't know.
But regardless of who it is, it's still a great piece of drama, because we have the spooky king that comes in, and he's pretty much like, you're going to build me the world's greatest weapon. It's really like Project Paperclip, almost.
It's incredibly creepy.
Oh, yeah, no, it's incredibly creepy, because it's like, Daedalus, you've killed my Minotaur, so I'm going to imprison you in your labyrinth, your own creation. Very much like Frankenstein, like you have to build me a better monster. I guess that's Bride of Frankenstein with Dr. Pretorius.
Yeah, I was like, wait, that doesn't happen in the first Frankenstein.
No, that's Bride of Frankenstein, because Dr. Pretorius is like, you can build a bride, the Bride of Frankenstein.
I'll trust you on that. I actually haven't seen Bride of Frankenstein. So.
Bride of Frankenstein's, I think, a much better movie than the first one. Because I like all the... I can get into a review about it, because it's pretty good. But I'll talk for too long about it. But I really do enjoy this, because we finally get some more Greek mythology that isn't just, like, modern. It's actually from the past. You have everything in context.
What do you mean by that?
I enjoy when you have Percy Jackson like doing like, oh wow, the Minotaurs and tidy whities, but then you have like this flashback scene which is, you know, really set without jokes.
It's actually ancient Greece, you mean?
Yeah, it's like ancient Greece, and it's talking about mythology like as it's happening, rather than how Percy Jackson kind of like filters it.
Right, rather than like a modern cool reboot for the mid-2000s, like actually the original myth.
You know, just imagine like Daedalus gets thrown in there, and the spooky king like comes up in a hoverboard, and he's like, "Hey Daedalus, you have to yeet into that maze and make me a super swaggy Minotaur robot thing."
Did you just say a super swaggy Minotaur?
Yes.
Where are you getting your slang from 7 years ago?
Okay, so fine. So pretty much what happens is that the spooky king's like, Daedalus, you need to build me Cyber Harambe.
No.
There you go.
Stop. Please.
I'm hip with the kids these days. What's new except for the BitTorrents and the iTunes and the Zunes?
I'm suffering a great deal at this bit, so we need to move on.
So Percy Jackson wakes up horrified, as, you know, most people would. Personally, I'm surprised that like 99% of all these Half-Bloods don't just take drugs to make them not remember their dreams? Like a dream suppressant? You would imagine that'd be something that they'd want to take.
I guess that's like a thing. I feel like if they took something like Ambien, they would just be like fighting monsters in their sleep, like sleepwalking, and then just wandering the camp with a sword. It just wouldn't be good.
No, but like you see the problem though is like, do you imagine like any of them get like 20 winks at night?
Yeah, no wonder they have like, short lifespans. They're not getting enough rest.
Yeah, they just like drop dead from exhaustion. Oh my god, this is terrible.
Get some sleep, you tall child. Stop burning the candle at both ends.
But Percy Jackson wakes up from the horrors of the night, and this is where kind of the problems begin because they have their gigantic spooky, like, I want to call it their corporate meeting because that's pretty much what it is. Like, hey guys, we're going to go to the sword field. Yeah, everyone's there. Though it's weird that they would do it in the sword arena and not the rec room, but I guess there was less people in the wintertime. So this is like the big cinematic scene where you have everyone in like a mini coliseum talking and discussing like what's going to happen because they have this huge problem with the labyrinth and how it could actually be here. And this is terrible because if Luke finds that string, it's game over, man. It's game over.
Right. So the string of Ariadne, that's like the magical string that leads you out of the labyrinth. It's the only way to figure it out. That's why what's his name was babbling about it when he emerged from the labyrinth. But
I'm about to say Rick Sanchez, but that's wrong. It's Chris Sanchez.
Yeah, that's definitely not it.
No, that's a completely different thing. I really do enjoy this scene because once again we have kids acting like kids, but also they're dealing with things that are serious, like invasion. Like, how do we plan for something like this? Because it's a lot like I think I said last time, like the invasion of Normandy on D-Day is that they have like this very small window, which is this huge glaring problem of the labyrinth is like breach their defenses and they can't technically seal it up.
And I like how they address any of like the plot holes that you might think of while reading this. Like, oh, well, why don't you just defend that one area of camp? They do think of doing that. Well, why don't you just blow it up? Then you can get rid of that entrance. It's like, oh, it's like magical architecture. It just reappeared when Clarice tried to do it in the, what was it, in Phoenix? I forget which location.
I want to talk about this because once again, this is, I really just want the Clarice side story mission of what she did in that year because what she does just sounds like a badass action movie. You ready for this? So pretty much what happens with Clarice is in Phoenix, Clarice demolished a whole building with a wrecking ball and the maze entrance just shifted a few feet. The best we can do is prevent Luke from learning to navigate the labyrinth. So even if you like nuke it from orbit, it's just going to move slightly from the crater.
Once again, satisfying. Like, this chapter is pretty satisfying plot-wise. Like, it totally addresses every concern you would have. Like, wait, that doesn't make sense. Oh, they do address the fact that, oh, wait, you could just try to blow up the entrance. No, you can't. Like, I think it's sort of getting ahead of all of the questions you might have about the plot. Like, it's totally explained. It's very neat. I don't know. I like this chapter a lot.
Once again, this really does show Rick Riordan is an outliner because he wrote this thing like the Labyrinth and then he looked at the pros and the cons because you can easily have so many cons with this. Like last episode, we kind of talked about how like, wait, why doesn't everyone just use the Labyrinth? Because yes, it's perilous, but that's one reason. Why don't we just block the thing? Well, you can't. Like they're showing things like within the rules because Rick Riordan is really good with the rules.
Yeah, it has its own logic to it that seems internally consistent, which is kind of a difficult thing to incorporate, especially with existing mythology and then with this added sort of like modern mythology of what Percy Jackson is. To kind of make something that meshes together that makes sense is difficult, and he does a good job.
I love rules in movies because it sets up like a precedent, as well as in books. If you have a rule, you shouldn't really break it or try to bend it. That's why like great horror movies have rules such as Nightmare on Elm Street, don't go to sleep. Yes, there's ways to bend that rule, but the primary thing is not falling asleep. You have other things like don't go in the dark, don't do this, don't do that. Like here, if it's like, oh, we have this labyrinth, but they like walk through and it's like nothing bad happened, you've kind of broken the rules and kind of the mystique of it. Here, it's a little different. I love that Rick Riordan sticks with the rules no matter what you do. Like in the last book, we had the Hoover Dam. We kind of forgot that Percy, you can't really hurt a mortal with celestial bronze. Unlike Luke, who has, Backbiter. They have the thing with like Rachel Elizabeth there where he accidentally hits her and it goes right through her. Like there's like you set up the rules in a way where it works.
Right, the setup and the payoff makes a lot of sense. Yeah, he's pretty good at that, honestly.
I have to stress this enough. This is the one great thing about Rick Riordan is he sticks to the rules, unlike J.K. Rowling, who makes rules just for that book and then
it
kind of
like
breaks
the
them.
book. Yeah, like you're thinking of the Time Turner, right? Yeah, because that sort of breaks the plot of a lot of things.
Like there's a lot of like oversights, like especially like you have like this great idea for a book and you're writing and writing and writing it, and then some schmuck on the internet like, wait a second, why don't you do it this way? And like, oh, that kind of unravels everything because my way of it's almost like sleight of hand. Like you the magician shows you one thing, but they're doing something with their other hand, so they want you to focus on the hand that's doing the trick and not the one causing the trick.
Yeah, I like the world building a lot in this chapter. I found it like really satisfying the way that they described the labyrinth, and then they showed the like the implications of what happens when you go in the labyrinth. Like even Clarice, who's kind of, known as being incredibly like rough and strong and she would do anything. She doesn't want to go back in it because she's so traumatized. And at first that doesn't seem consistent with her character. But then, of course, we have the scene with her and Chris in the basement of the big house where they're like talking, and he obviously has been severely traumatized and he's sort of babbling nonsense, and she looks genuinely upset in a way where we're not used to before. Even Percy remarks like, oh, he didn't imagine her caring for someone in this way. He's never seen her act this like empathetic. Like it all meshes with like her characterization is slightly different. Like, oh, that doesn't seem like something Clarice would do. But then there's totally an explanation for why she's acting that way, like later on.
See, the problem with the first book with Clarice is that the way that Rick Riordan wrote her is she's a total psychopath. Like, there's no way of like beating around that bush.
She has like no empathy whatsoever, and she is willing to do anything for the glory and isn't scared of anything because she just wants to like,
There's the power she like sadistically keeps shocking him with like her special weapon, and she tries to kill him several times. But here it's like the complete 180 where I enjoy having the human elements of a character like this because it actually, fleshes them out rather than having, I'm like big burly girl that can do everything and I chop wood with my bare hands and my teeth.
Just hiya. Yeah, I find that really nice too because it's not only growth on Clarice's part in the sense that, oh, she's going from kind of like this very gruff, emotionless character. She only cares about, impressing her dad. She only cares about the glory of going on a quest. She has no fear. Like all of those things are established, but she's sort of grown into a softer, more complicated person who cares about people. And also it's growth on Percy's part because it's from the perspective of him. So we're kind of getting this idea that he's learning that Clarice is complicated too. So that's growth on his part. Like, oh, wait, I'm seeing her as more multidimensional instead of just like, oh, I saw her as this kind of emotionless being who didn't have any kind of connections to people. Even like the way in which he's weirded out how close she seems with Annabeth in the last couple chapters. It's like he's learning, oh, right, yeah, she's like a person. She's not just like my nemesis that I met when I first came to camp. You know what I mean?
I've always enjoyed characters like this where you think like they're like terrible people at first, and then you kind of like see them and kind of like rationalize things. Like, for me, I don't hate Snape. I mean, I can see the problems with him. Like, I understand like there's some things about him being spiteful and stuff, but like you can at least see the method of his madness and kind of like why he does the things he does. A lot of characters, like if you can have characters that are like gray level characters where like they can be mean, but also you can see the good in them. I think that's kind of
why they act the way they act, or they have complicated things going on. I mean that's been established from the beginning with Clarice, even with some of the complicated ways in which she relates to her dad.
The prime example of this is in Sea of Monsters when she's talking to her dad in the boiler room of the ironclad ship. Like you can see like she's hard boiled, but also like her dad's also a terrible person, so you can kind of see like the similarities and the differences between Clarice Leroux and Aries. Because it's not just a one for one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think, it's like not out of nowhere, too. Like, that's it. She doesn't just all of a sudden become an empathetic person. There's been hints that she's more complicated. And I think that that's kind of necessary for a good story, too. Because if she just stayed like the first impression you get of her in The Lightning Thief, that would not
unbearable.
Be an interesting character. Yeah, she would be so irritating if she just was that mode all of the time of just being like, I'm going to beat you, Percy Jackson. I don't like you. The look on your face.
It's like the Draco Malfoy effect of like how in the beginning he's like really intimidating, and then by the end of all the books he's just pathetic. Like it's to the point of where
you actually have a real sad backstory, buddy.
Not even that. It's just like, oh my god, could you get any sadder? Oh yeah. Wait. His dad
see
took
what you
him
mean.
to a marching band one day.
And it's not even quite as bad as that either, because it's not like she's, necessarily doing anything that bad. She's been a bit of a jerk, but she hasn't been evil. It's not like Luke or something who's working for a objectively aggressive, dangerous cause. Like, she's just a bit of a meanie.
A big fat meanie. That's what
Yeah.
I'm thinking about, like in SpongeBob. Even like with the whole rationality of the convention that they have on the sword field, I do enjoy like the smaller aspects of like Juniper actually pulls Percy to the side and kind of talks to him about Luke. Like, oh, he did know about the labyrinth, but I didn't want to tell anybody because he's kind of hot. Like, everyone just has like this weird complex of like,
Luke, yeah.
it's like, wait a second, you didn't tell anyone because he's hot? I like the interaction before. Like, I saw Luke, I was going to tell anybody. I wasn't going to tell anybody. And Grover's like, yeah, she has good taste. And then she has
good taste because she says that she just thinks it's like a dumb cave and she thinks caves are gross. And then he's like, oh yeah, she has good taste. And then she's like, oh well, I also did mention it because Luke is kind of a hottie. And then Grover goes, oh, I retract what I said about good taste. Never mind.
See, that would be a generally funny scene to see like actually played out like theatrically or like in a movie.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think of stuff like this, you have to think of it like in live action. That's just great comedic timing. That's actually a really great setup and payoff joke.
Yeah, I like the comedic timing with Grover most of the time. He's a good comic relief in moments that are especially stressful.
I don't think we've ever talked about Rick Riordan and his comedy because I think his comedy is really on point, and I really do enjoy a lot of the comedic aspects of these books. Some jokes do fall flat, but for the most part, I think he's got great setup and payoff.
Well, sometimes they get into dad joke territory a little bit too goofy, but a lot of the times it feels like something that a teenager would say, or like some sort of snarky thing that a, 15, 16-year-old would say.
I'm sure that came with the trait of being like an elementary school teacher or middle school teacher. Also being a father himself, I would imagine he'd pick up his own jokes, though. Do I see Rick Riordan being the grill master of like a poolside barbecue? Oh, heck yeah, I do.
Yes.
I feel like, oh, man, I can already imagine like he's got cargo shorts on, like a white t-shirt on, and then he has like sandals and socks for some odd reason, because that's how I always want to imagine Rick Riordan.
Just the dadliest dad. Yeah, for some reason now I'm picturing Rick Steves. Do you know that guy? He's like really obsessed with barbecue, this TV chef on PBS. And one of the funniest things about Rick Steves is that he doesn't call Earth. He calls it Planet Barbecue. Like, whenever he talks about the world, he's like, here on Planet Barbecue. And sometimes I think he's talking about all of the barbecue in the world. But from what I understand, that's just what he calls Earth, is Planet Barbecue.
In my head, I'm thinking about like the super epic like fantasy adventure story where someone ends up in like Planet Barbecue, but also like the main
the sequel to Super Meat Boy.
Yeah, it's the third of Super Meat Boy, because I think there's a sequel coming out.
That's true.
But I'm just imagining like the main fortress is Flavortown. It's a Guy Fieri.
Exactly, yeah. At the center of Planet Barbecue is Flavortown. The forbidden city of Flavortown.
It has forbidden like hickory knowledge.
Yeah, it has like a great big like fortress built out of ribs or something. Anyway, this is getting sidetracked.
No, it also has like a statue of Guy Fieri.
How did we get to Guy Fieri? Really, we say the Half-Bloods have ADD, but we get quite distracted.
Well, I generally have ADHD, so this is just fine for me.
Yeah, I should be reining us in more, because then somehow we end up talking about Planet Barbecue for 15 minutes.
I know someone's getting a kick out of this, hopefully. But what I want to talk about after this is kind of, I like the idea that Annabeth is the main leader of this quest, not Percy Jackson.
Yeah, me too. Finally, right? And in a way, I like that Annabeth getting a quest is that it's sort of fraught. Like, it's not cut and dry whether it's good or bad. Because on the one hand, yes, she's wanted a quest since forever. Like, that's kind of one of the main conflicts of between Annabeth and Percy when they first meet each other. Is like, oh, of course, this guy immediately gets a quest, and I've been waiting for a quest since forever, and I've been like basically living at camp.
Here's the problem though with that, is like every time she's like try to get on a quest, she's either like shanghaied by Percy.
Right, she ends up on a quest as like a second fiddle, but it's never like her deal. But what's great about Annabeth getting a quest in this circumstance is her It's sort of like be careful what you wish for, because she gets what she wants, but then it's kind of like the most horrifying quest imaginable, which is, oh yeah, you're so great at doing this because all your life you've been studying architecture and you understand Daedalus and his labyrinth more than anybody, but it's like the most dangerous thing you could possibly do, because it's not just sort of hack and slash fighting monsters, it's so much more complicated. Like, you go into this labyrinth and it's designed to trick you, to distract you, to use your weaknesses against you. And that's so much more cerebral and terrifying than the idea of just like fighting a monster that's super big or whatever. It's like you look at Chris Rodriguez and he's like babbling, nonsense at Clarice because his brain has been destroyed by the labyrinth. Like, that's horrifying.
See, this is why I like the Labyrinth to be the academic foil to Annabeth, because she is smart in so many ways, but this is the way, like, the true villain of the story is her going to be tested by this.
It's her mind, in a way. Yeah. I think that's, like, the perfect quest for her. Yeah.
It's like, how do you, like, make a quest that's designed for someone that's super smart and very competent? You put them in a situation where all their logic, like, goes out the window. The other way to have it is like Luke gets like an idiot beam and like zaps the IQ out of Annabeth.
Right, everyone's a moron. Or it's not even just that she wouldn't necessarily be smart, but just the way that the labyrinth works. It plays on your intelligence. Like, oh, you think you're being logical, but it's using your weaknesses against you. Like, I
hate to use this reference, B, but this reminds me of Labyrinth, where Sarah's going through the maze and she does the logical thing of, oh, I'm going to mark where I'm going, but the labyrinth changes. The labyrinth changes it because like there's the little guy underneath the tiles that keeps flipping them over. You have someone that's very logical, but then the second you get into a place where like the rules of physics might not apply, then you have a problem.
Right, and she might not also be able to trust her own mind at that point because it literally would be affecting her own perception of reality. So she might, think like she's able to get Percy and her out of the labyrinth when they're fighting the giant scorpions, because literally they're there for 2 seconds, and even then they've been gone for like a full hour and they didn't realize it. That's how quickly it messes with your perception, is you think that you've been gone for a short time, it's already been an hour.
I do like that Annabeth goes off and goes to get the prophecy. Percy kind of breaks the rules a little bit at this point of like going to the big house, and this is where we actually see the scene with Chris and Clarice, which I kind of want to talk about, because I really do want to talk about this, because this is the way to show like a horrifying scene in a kid's book where it's like it's not played for a joke. It's like played like reality, like a crazy person like would kind of be like.
Right. Yeah, because I do think sometimes madness, so to speak, in kids' books or like children's media tends to be played for a laugh sometimes, where it's like, he's crazy, he lost his mind. Like, even speaking of Harry Potter, like, what's his name? The professor who's so full of himself.
You're talking about Lockhart.
Lockhart, yeah, when he, like, gets, he, like, stupefies himself or something like that. And then he's just, like, babbling and doesn't remember anything. And that's, like, isn't it hilarious? He doesn't remember who he is. And, like, that seems to be definitely a joke that happens a lot in kids' books for some reason.
See, in Harry Potter, it's a little different because they actually show 3 types of people being insane, because they have the Lockhart one, then they have Neville's parents, which is not played for a joke whatsoever.
Right, it's like
in the books. It's not. And then you have Bellatrix, which is just like, I'm kooky crazy. I'm Tim Burton's ex-wife. And you're just like, oh, right. God, stop.
Yeah, that's true. I guess it kind of runs the gamut, but there is sometimes a little bit of like an ableist slant to the way that mentally ill people are portrayed in kids' books. It's like very much like a scary, funny thing.
I wouldn't call it like an ableist thing, because it's like, when it comes to it, you have to think of it as this is kids media. So how do you write it, or especially getting it past the censors? Because sometimes, like, let's use Rick Riordan as an example. You could have done the comedic route, but he didn't.
I'm glad he didn't. That's what I'm saying, is there is a way to do it without being that way.
There are some books where you could probably like push it to the extreme, but then like, because Rick Riordan's established at this point, he can like start doing stuff like this, while other people like, I want to show sanity this way, and then like their editor or whoever puts a note, yeah, you can't do it this way. It's too scary for kids, which is an absurd thing. And I like that they treat it like it's not played for laughs, because you can have like Chris babbling on about string, or you can have him talking about like hard candy and like stupid things, like he thinks he's a duck. You could do that.
Right, like you could make it like, oh, he's hypnotized or something, but it's actually played pretty seriously. In to such a point that it actually brings out the seriousness of Clarice in a way that we haven't seen before, where you're like, oh, right, she's like a multidimensional person who feels empathy.
And she likes Chris. Like, that's kind of like, I guess, her love interest.
Right, like she's connected to him.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, she's trying to nurse him back to health, but you would imagine Clarice would have been like, really like what she is in real life, which is pretty much brute force and all that stuff. But here she's like caring and nurturing.
Actually, this scene, it reminded me of something, and I just remembered what it was now. By the way, this is spoilers for Hunger Games if you guys have planned on reading it. But, like, it's been a while. Sorry. But, yeah.
You know how I believe that it's not a spoiler? It's because when I go to thrift stores now, I see thousands upon thousands of copies of the Hunger Games.
Yeah, I mean, people have read the books. So, like, skip ahead, like, a minute if you don't want spoilers for that. But anyway, when PETA gets hijacked and they totally make him forget
Give
who
him a
he
lobotomy?
is. I mean, it's essentially right. I mean, have you read the Hunger Games books?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah,
I have.
so
Well, he gets indoctrinated.
He gets indoctrinated, and then like he doesn't remember who Katniss is, and his like brain is all addled and everything. And it's 100% not played to be funny, and it's extremely disturbing and upsetting. And she's sort of pleading with him to remember who she is and to understand actually who he used to be. And that's very reminiscent of this scene where it's definitely not like, haha, look at the crazy man or whatever. It's very seriously like, oh no, he doesn't remember who he is kind of thing.
If you want like a good example of this as well, I think this scene actually is a really great example, but I think my favorite one is in The Name of the Wind. There's a part in the book, it's not really a spoiler. Quovolf ends up going to like he takes a back road by mistake and ends up in like a mental asylum for kids. And it is the most horrifying scene ever put to page. Patrick Rothfuss does a good job at this, especially that his dad was, I think, worked at a mental asylum. Like he actually was an administrator, so he actually saw that stuff. But the scariest of that is actually listening to the audiobook version of that. Like I can't actually listen to it.
That sounds incredibly disturbing.
It's actually is disturbing. Like I actually get not cringy, but like I feel like uneasy listening to it because the person Nick Podem who does the performance of it, like gives it his all, and it is the scariest bit of like what like how a kid that has like mental health issues or like that is insane or has problems would be like in the situation, and it tears your heart apart. Especially here, the scene tears your heart apart, man.
Yeah, it's like pretty upsetting, honestly, and especially because Percy's not expecting it. Like he just sort of walks in and then he's like, "Oh, awkward. Whoops." A lot is happening here. Especially
with like the tonal shifts of Percy Jackson where it's supposed to all pretty much be played for laughs, but then you have these very serious scenes which are really welcome to Percy Jackson because they're not
okay, so
done.
I have something to say about what Chris says.
Ooh, I want to hear what Chris says.
So Percy walks in, he recognizes who Chris is, he sees the whole kind of upsetting scene between him and Clarice, and it's like very upsetting. And then Chris sees him and says, then he caught a glimpse of me and made a strangled, terrified sound. The son of Poseidon, he's horrible. I backed away, hoping Clarice hadn't seen me. I listened for her to come charging out and yell at me, but instead she just kept talking to Chris in a sad, pleading voice, trying to get him to drink the nectar. Maybe she thought it was part of Chris's hallucination, but son of Poseidon, Chris had been looking at me, and yet why did I get the feeling he hadn't been talking about me at all? Okay, let's unpack this for a second.
Jeezy, crazy, peppa cheesy. This is just imagining like this scene in your head.
There's one spicy meatball, everybody.
Oh no, Mamma Mia, here we go again.
So, what's my crack theory on what he's talking about? Here we go. So, what do we know?
Wait, let me like sit down really quickly. Let's get some tea.
Get a cup of tea. Yeah, listen in for one of B's insane theories. The thing is, sometimes I guess completely right and other times I'm completely wrong. So, like, I'm feeling 50-50 on this theory.
One second, let me get the conspiracy board. Okay, is that good?
Get your red yarn out, you guys.
I'm getting you the red yarn. Is that a good position, B? Do you need me to move it more to the left or to the right? You good here?
So let's just like look specifically at what he says. He doesn't necessarily see Percy and say son of Poseidon because Percy specifically says, why did I get the feeling he hadn't been talking about me at all? So it would have to be another son of Poseidon. Specifically son, so that rules out a lot of people. And secondly, we all know that within the scheme of things that the big three are not supposed to have children, which means that Percy's supposed to be the only son of Poseidon, as far as we know. But then you have to think, okay, well, Percy's very young. Who would be a son of Poseidon, but they would still be alive? They would have to be an older half-blood. Who's an older half-blood? Quintus, who we find out has been sneaking around near the entrance of the labyrinth as per what we heard from Juniper. So, my theory is, because he even mentions that he's been in the labyrinth before, my theory is that Quintus is somehow an old son of Poseidon who has survived this long. Running theory.
Oh my god, it's my older brother, Quintus.
This is my theory.
That's when you have like the hard fade to black, and you have like the musical sting. For some reason, this is like Days of Our Lives.
Yeah, right. It's like, you're my brother. Yeah, okay. So the thing is, this might be totally batty, or maybe I'm right. Maybe this is the whole plot twist of who Quintus is. Maybe it's a red herring, but this is my theory, and I know you can't confirm or deny.
No, let's talk about this. Let's dissect this a little bit, because it's still in the realm of possibility for something to happen like this, because we have the cutoff point. The cutoff point is 1945, or I guess maybe even less. I don't know between like, is it talking about like the war in Europe, like when that's won, or is that the war with Japan when that's won? But at the end of World War II, so that's 1945. It's still in the realm of possibility that Poseidon, what's the best way to put this? He swam upstream, as it will, and had a child, and that child grew up to be old and cranky and still survived, because we know from past books that any one of the big three can be super powerful, and they have a longer chance of longevity than, let's say, a daughter of Aphrodite.
And we don't know how old Quintus is. We know that Percy specifically knows that he looks good for his age. Like, he has gray hair, but he's like very in shape and like not, I don't know. He doesn't look decrepit or aging in a way that like, so I don't know. It's hard to say, like, is he extremely old? Like, you know, literally 100 years old or something like that. And he just looks young.
Also, time does play a different factor in this, because we even have in this chapter the talk about Daedalus, and like he could still technically be alive if he's in the labyrinth.
He could still be alive, exactly, yeah. So the longevity of people in this is different than humans. The way that people age can be different. I mean, we've seen different examples, right? Like we've seen Nico and Bianca, like, oh, they kind of squeaked under the sort of loophole of them not having kids because, oh, they were trapped in the Lotus Hotel for a while. So like aging is thrown off and stuff like that. So we know that those kind of mechanics happen all the time. Talia aged differently than she would have if she had lived through the whole becoming a tree thing. Like there's different ways in which people don't look the age that they are and that kind of thing. So I think it's completely within the realm of possibility that Quintus is his brother. That's my theory. Am I sticking to it? I don't know.
Yeah, we'll find out. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I do like that interaction we have, because it isn't like the comedic thing of having Percy Jackson leaves of his own accord, and the information is not like Clary sees Percy and starts like, get out of here! Get! It's not like that at all, where Percy kind of like leaves and of course like stumbles a little bit later and finds Annabeth. And I kind of like that transition, because finally, once in a life, we aren't just like the person's interrupted for interruption's sake. It's actually the character is willing to leave the information than it just being interrupted.
Yeah, and there's a few moments too where Percy tries to get the information out of Annabeth, and I do think it's like very believable in the way that she's sort of hedging what she's talking about. Like, I'm not entirely sure if she's not being forthcoming because she thinks it's like a very foreboding prophecy that indicates that someone's going to die that she doesn't want to like necessarily reveal. Well, I mean, we could read the prophecy, and then there's sort of something at the end that indicates that it might say something else that she's not fully admitting.
So, B, you ready to read this prophecy? We're going to do it the weird, creepy, like, twinsies way. I'll go first, because we'll dissect it line by line, and we'll see what's going to happen throughout this adventure. Are you ready for this?
Okay, here we go.
You shall delve into the darkness of the endless maze.
The dead, the traitor, and the lost one raise.
You shall rise or fall by the Ghost King's hand.
The child of Athena's final stand.
Destroy with a hero's final breath.
And then something, death, or Annabeth, or something like that. Yeah, so it's obviously not complete because it's rhyming couplets, so it's not. She's hiding something.
It's the old thing of like Atlantis is like, wait a second. Like they start talking about this thing about the source of power, but then it just cuts off like as if there's a page missing. Oh no.
So, first line pretty obvious, delve in the darkness of the endless maze. Okay, that's just we know that already.
You're going to go into the maze, it's going to be pretty dark, so bring a flashlight.
The dead, the traitor, and the lost one raise.
So, the dead is probably Nico.
Right. The traitor is Luke. And the lost one is Pan. I mean, that's what Grover thinks. You shall rise or fall by the Ghost King's hand, which I thought that was pretty satisfying that Percy, unlike the dum-dum that we're used to him being, is like, hey, that might have something to do with the fact that Nico's been palling around with ghosts.
Wait a second, spooky Ghost King. Oh no, it's the Lich King. Ooh, no.
The child of Athena's final stand. I mean, does she die? Again, there's more than one child of Athena, but she's the one going on this quest, so that doesn't sound great, Bob.
See, a final stand doesn't necessarily mean that she'll die. It just means
death.
That
it just means it's her final fight.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that. It's like we're gonna take a final stand here. Like they might be surrounded by something, and the only way to really do it is just to fight it. Like we're gonna set up fortifications.
Yeah, that's true. It's not quite indicating death, but it could be. Especially with the next line, which is destroy with a hero's final breath. I mean, that could be anybody. A hero's final breath. Like that's basically all of them.
Oh no, I figured it out, B. Do you want to know the spoiler for this? It's like War of the Worlds. It's germs.
It's germs. Yep. And then something, Eth, which could be death or Annabeth or something. So yeah, that's maybe one of our vaguest prophecies.
There's also one more line though, but we don't know what it is. What do you think it could be?
It's either death or Annabeth. Like those are the two. I can't think of any other words that would rhyme.
I got it. Friendabeth.
But like the words preceding that could literally be anything, so it doesn't really tell us much.
But we know it's important enough that Annabeth isn't going to say.
She's lying about it, yeah. Annabeth, just be truthful. And it's like, you could just tell that Percy, it's like driving him insane because he keeps asking about it. And then finally he says, Annabeth, about your prophecy, the line about a hero's last breath. You're wondering which hero? I don't know. No, something else. I was thinking the last line usually rhymes with the one before it. Was it something about, did it end with the word death? Annabeth stared down at her scrolls. You'd better go, Percy. Get ready for the quest. I'll see you in the morning. And then she just, so that she's really concerned about him, I guess, because she would definitely share it if it wasn't something, I don't know, that she should keep from him. So does it have to do with Percy specifically?
We don't know, B. It's one of those things where you have to think of it this way. Annabeth is the type of person that usually is very straightforward. Well, actually, no, take that back. She's not, because she lied about being a hunter of Artemis. Like, she wanted to join up with them. That was a hard decision for Percy type of situation. So, really, Annabeth is not the most truthful character ever in Percy Jackson at all. Because she keeps information from him. Because remember, she also has the information about the big prophecy.
Yeah, she keeps a lot from him. I mean, she also didn't really tell him about any of that stuff with Clarice going on her quest last year and all of the stuff that she found about the Labyrinth until pretty much last minute, so.
If we think about like Annabeth being like on her character morality chart, she's probably neutral or chaotic neutral or chaotic good. She isn't pure good because she isn't like saintly. She holds these secrets. She does all these things.
She hides things from people she loves for various questionable reasons.
I love you, but I hate you. And I love you, but I hate you. B, maybe the last line of the prophecy just says, and Luke is a big old jerk face.
And I want to punch Luke to death. Like, wait, okay, you have an opinion about this all of a sudden, Oracle? And when Luke fell from the cliff, he was a mess. No, that's like a slant rhyme. That's like an Eminem rhyme. That's not quite...
Oh man, you're gonna start digging up Mom's spaghetti? Palms are sweaty?
Yeah, he looked like Mom's spaghetti when he fell off the cliff.
Well, I mean, his head did. Like, all the brains just went...
Ugh, gross. Anyway.
But yeah, we'll find out eventually, hopefully soon, Who knows? But pretty much they're gearing up to go into this quest because we didn't even talk about the lineup, B. Who is going on this quest? Because Annabeth does have to break the rules.
Okay, so yeah, she breaks that's the chapter title. Is the fact that she's breaking the powerful number of 3, which is normally who goes on a quest, so it would be her and 2 other people.
Tells your story.
In this case, she wants to bring 3 other people. 3 is a magic number, and that's literally basically what Chiron says. He's like, it's a good number. You're good. You're threatening the gods by not following that, because he even points out like, Annabeth's motives as far as bringing 3 extra people, including herself, on the quest, because that would make 4, and that like doesn't jive with the whole 3 is a magic number mythological kind of superstition that like 3 is, I don't know, it's a good number for quests. He doesn't really explain why, it just that's the way it is. It's a sacred number, it's an important number, and to deviate from that is to sort of test the fate of the quest and to say, oh, you're only going to come back with a certain number of people regardless of who you start with, as is the case with the last quest that we went on in the last book, where they started with 5 people and they came back with 3. So it's,
See, that's a horrifying concept, the idea of only having 3 people. I guess like 3 is a magic number.
Yeah, it's the Schoolhouse Rock.
Oh no, we're going Schoolhouse Rock
logic.
Wait a second,
Yes.
Did we do this exact same thing in Ready Player One?
Did we? Maybe.
Yes, we did, because they had to have all 3 keys to open the gate.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, we did.
It's actually neat in like a lot of cultures, like a lot of numbers like signify a lot of things, like something special, like 7. 7's a very lucky number in a lot of mythologies. Same as 3. I guess in like mine culture I might be getting this wrong, but the 0 was invented there, but that's also a very like a holy number because it just means the idea of absolute nothingness, or like you don't need to have a value for anything. I'm not like a mythology mathematician, so I can't be like the person that wrote The Wizard of Oz, L. Frank Baum.
But either way, Annabeth, regardless of the advice of Chiron and everybody else, decides that she needs those 3 people there in addition to herself. So that would be 4. So it would be her, Percy, obviously, Grover, and Tyson.
Yes, and that's an interesting lineup because we don't have anyone new going on the quest, which...
We don't. Yeah, it's the old gang.
I don't like that a little bit because I always like when they add like a new character that isn't necessarily...
Right, like a new dynamic.
See, I get it. I get the reason why they're doing this because this is all the fan favorites, but I really wish they would have had someone new, kind of like the Bianca or Nico insert. Kind of like, I'd love to have Clarice. I understand why she's not there, or even having someone that you wouldn't necessarily like have on this quest, like maybe like Beckendorf or Selena, like someone that they've already kind of established but hasn't really gone on a quest.
Mm-hmm. That we could learn more about. Yeah, I could see why that would be more interesting to kind of have a new person. Though we haven't seen Tyson in a while because he's been gone doing his own thing. So it's kind of nice to have him back.
See, here's the problem though with having Tyson on the quest. Like we know like who Tyson is. Like we know that I wouldn't say he's like simple-minded, but like we know that like he's very gullible.
He's innocent, yeah.
He's innocent. But here's the problem though. You're putting him in a situation where like he'd almost be completely useless because if you're dealing with like logical issues of going through a maze, you would imagine he'd probably be the least likely person. Though maybe that's the reason.
But in some ways, he's like immune to it, maybe because he like.
See, I think the maze is designed for like smart people, but then you have someone like Tyson who just goes with the flow and does his own thing. Maybe that almost like bypasses the maze. Here's the good example, B. Think of it as like a corn maze. Tyson's the type of person that would just like go through the maze to the exit. He isn't gonna actually go through like the windy roads.
Right, exactly. Or he would just like push down the corn or something. Like he would find a way through somehow that wasn't as like logicked out.
Everyone like overthinks things. Oh my, I keep using Labyrinth, but it's like the parts like you have to like look over here and like Sarah like looks into like the maze and realizes that if you turn your head, the maze changes slightly. Like there's actually like forced perspective.
Well, also Tyson's important because he has knowledge of mechanisms, which is helpful in something that's like been designed. And he's like designed to thrive in like cave underground environments. So he's not freaked out by that. Well, Grover definitely is. The only reason Grover wants to go really is because he thinks that Pan is there.
See, this is where Percy gets One-Eyed Willie's treasure map, and they have to like go into like the spooky caves. The second they have the part where they have like the weird like piano they have to play, I'm gonna be like, I'm out of here.
I thought it was kind of weird that Grover all of a sudden does like the 180 and is like, yeah, I guess I'll go because Pan is in there, because there's been like a whole discussion between him and Annabeth where he was like, no, definitely not. Even if Pan is in there, it freaks me out and I don't want to go down there. And like all he needed to do was hear the Oracle be like, hey, maybe Pan's down there. And doesn't even necessarily say that. It just says like the lost one or whatever. And he's like, well, guess I'm going.
I think it's like the thing about, it's like, hey, if Pan jumped off a bridge, would you, Grover? Grover starts sweating nervously.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, like I think there is a line somewhere in this chapter where it says like, oh, all of a sudden his hesitation completely disappears as soon as he hears that in the prophecy. So
see, that's a dangerous thing about having hope sometimes, is like you think it's like the prophecy works for you, and that way the lost one might be something, or it could mean something completely different.
It could be something else. Yeah, exactly. But again, Grover, I guess it kind of makes sense because Grover is kind of like dedicated to Pan in this way. It's like the cult of personality of Pan. He's obsessed with this singular goal of finding him. So it makes sense why he would like maybe not think about his own personal safety.
But then that's kind of leaves like a dangerous way of thinking about what happens when he finds Pan.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. Because again, when has a prophecy ever been direct? Like almost never. So like it just says the lost one. Like that could mean anything.
Well, there's plenty of ways to interpret the word lost.
Yeah, exactly. Like it could be metaphorically lost. Like in some ways, Luke is lost, like emotionally. I mean, Daedalus is lost. They don't know where he is. Like there's tons of people who are lost in various definitions of the word.
He who hesitates is lost.
Or she.
Oh, yes, or she. So, B, are you ready to go to the next chapter?
I guess now, now or never.
So, B, what is the name of the next chapter?
Nico buys Happy Meals for the dead. Wow, it's very rare that they like kind of straight up say something that a character does. Actually, I mean the last chapter they name check Annabeth specifically, but Nico buys Happy Meals for the dead. I guess we're gonna probably have another Iris message or some sort of flashback or dream sequence thing involving Percy seeing what's happening with Nico. Because the only way we could see anything that's happening with a character that isn't directly there is through something weird like the dream sequences or like the Iris message thing that happened. So that's the only circumstance.
I would say, like, what do you think it's going to be? But I'm pretty sure it's very self-explanatory in what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're just going to see him hanging out with that ghost again. I don't exactly know. Well, it's pretty vague intentionally, but obviously we're going to have some sort of follow-up with Nico that we'll see what's happening with that ghost that's giving him terrible advice.
And also, buying Happy Meals. There's not enough food in there for a growing emo kid like that.
He just, like, draws a sad face on the Happy Meal.
Oh, no, because he's like this weird emo goth. He'd be like, this is my unhappy meal.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, no. Was it like McGothels?
That's like how in Japan they had, like, that all-black burger.
Oh, that's exactly what Nico would be eating.
Like, it's dark like my soul. Oh, you're just going through your emo phase.
Makes my mouth black like my soul. And also, it's terrible for you like my soul.
Yeah, that's like a pretty vague chapter title. It doesn't really tell us much else.
B, are you ready to read some emails?
I am ready to read some emails. We got a few from Isaac, who says, I know you're probably not going to read this. Wink, wink.
Oh, we are reading this right now, Isaac.
Right now. But I really love your podcast. I listen to it every night before I go to bed. I love how you go chapter by chapter, but I still can't wait until you get to Magnus and the Gods of Asgard. It is my favorite series and is really good. Well, I can't think of anything else to say, so bye.
I really do like Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard.
Sweet and to the point. We're not going to get to Magnus Chase for a while, right? Like at least another
many moons from now.
Years or
many
something?
Moons.
I don't even know. It's going to be a long time. So sorry, but we'll probably get to it eventually.
By the time that happens, I'll actually have like a sweet ass Viking beard.
Mm-hmm. It's true. By then, I'll have a Viking beard.
I have an email from Annika. Hello, my name is Annika. If I'm getting your name wrong, I'm sorry. That's how it was on Translate. And I have been listening to your podcast for a few weeks now, and I absolutely love it. I find it so funny when B is like, what's going to happen? And Zach refuses to say anything.
Yeah, basically.
Same.
You got to refuse.
I'm not telling you anything, B.
Well, I don't want you to tell me anything, though, because I think...
Oh, no, I'm not telling the rest of this email, because it might be spoilery.
Oh,
no.
Is it spoilery?
No, I'm joking. I laughed so much out of the podcast, and even though I read the series a very long time ago, I really do enjoy listening to you both discussing it. Thank you for making this podcast. Lots of love, Annika Hart.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you do a pretty good job of keeping me spoilerless, for the most part.
Oh, I can spoil like everything else but Percy Jackson to you. I can tell you all about Game of Thrones. I can tell you all about Harry Potter, like all that stuff you don't care about. Like this is where it's at. B, did you know that Harry Potter's a wizard?
Harry Potter's a what?
A wizard.
Yeah, I did.
He's
I'm a
also
what?
He's also a Horcrux. I just saved you like 7 books.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen those cars that are just like, it has like a Snape kills Dumbledore like bumper sticker? It's like, oh yeah, I just got spoilers for my car.
See, that's the way to do it. Like I remember watching a video like a long time ago when the Half-Blood Prince came out, where there was like a news article where like, these people like destroyed a person's car because they were like being jerk faces, and they read the last part of the book and screamed it out of the window in front of like
that
the
sucks.
line. Oh no, like they like ran the dude off the road. It was like insane. It was like a news article. But then there was also like a huge billboard like someone paid for to troll people. Like when it comes to Harry Potter, like there's this weird thing in media now where like don't get spoiled because you need to see it, which is the world's greatest marketing campaign because they did that for Endgame and so many people saw Endgame. Though when it comes to like Game of Thrones, everyone like live tweets that. It's like
everyone live tweets it. Yeah, it's a different thing.
Yeah, it's a different thing. It's a great marketing tool.
So we got an email from Nuno. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name.
I think it's like, remember, I think we had him talk about this. It was No.
Who said, "Hi, Zack and B. Sorry for the drastic email subject." Wait, what is the email subject? I don't know what it is.
Oh, the email subject is, are you ready for this, B? Can you handle the thunder?
I don't know.
Death of a half-blood.
Oh, geez. Okay. Regarding a half-blood's death, considering what has been read so far and that they are half humans and affected by everything, both by human and mythological harm, they would die in human fashion, evidenced by Luke's little fall on occasions where Percy was almost fatally injured, the Scorpion in the first book. As for the graveyard situation, given that the demigods are attacked, if not in camp or in quests, the horrifying truth would be that they are eaten or killed throughout America with remains left around, like what happened to Polyphemus Island. So there's that, I guess. On a happier note, keep up the awesome work. Yeah, so there's like nowhere where all the dead half-bloods are. They're just sort of strewn about their dead bodies.
Jesus Space Christ. That is
so
terrible.
That's not horrifying at all.
No, I'm just imagining like there's probably like a drawer somewhere of just like unsolved murder mysteries, and there's the person with the conspiracy board like, wait a second.
But I'm also imagining like Rachel Elizabeth Dare and people like her who can see like mythological things like through the mist, and she just sees a pile of bones.
Oh no, they'd still be like people
horrifying.
bones. They're not going to disappear. They're not going to be disappeared from the mist.
True.
So they're just bones lying around.
So people like your ex are just going there.
See, this is what I'm imagining, B. And that is like someone's like walking throughout their day, like whistling a tune, and all of a sudden, like they get attacked by a monster, which no one else can see. But all of a sudden, they start like getting like eaten. Like that is the scariest thing you could possibly think about.
And they just like have a dead body there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty dark. Anyway, nighty night.
That's a great idea for a horror movie, actually. And then you just have Red is just like horrified because they can see all this stuff. It's just like, I see dead people.
Well, that's messed up, but thank you for your email.
B, do you remember when our show wasn't about child deaths? But now we have to talk about it?
Now all of a sudden it's completely about child death. Like, welcome to the Child Death Cast.
Oh, wow. We have a good harvest for this year.
For sale, tiny coffins.
And little suits.
Teeny tiny baby coffins.
I'm just, okay, there's like a little suit store near my house. I think I sent you the picture of like the really adorable tuxedo that I saw, like the child-sized tuxedo.
Yep. Yeah, that's like me going to Men's Warehouse.
I'm sure that tuxedo could probably fit you.
No, I don't know about that. I think I'm a little too squishy around the middle for a child's tuxedo.
But yeah, Little Baby Coffins. That's also probably the name of a cool rap group, Little Baby Coffins.
Oh god, that's so dark. Did you see that? It was like the dumbest tweet that I saw today where it's just like, when your mom asks you what you want to pet in the pet tank at the aquarium, and then it was just like a clip of Mark Zuckerberg, like when he was like awkwardly barbecuing.
Yeah.
But they just made like a super cut of him going, "Sweet baby rays, sweet baby rays, sweet baby rays." Like, I want to pet the sweet baby manta rays.
I thought you were gonna say like when you like, go to the petting zoo and the only animal you want to pet is a thestral.
Only certain kids can see a thestral.
See, that's why you just be like the one weird kid that's like petting air, and you cut to reality and he's like petting a thestral. Like, I love you, goth horse.
We were just talking about how we're not turning this into like the dead child podcast, and here we go. Just right into the dead child bit.
You gotta run with it, like Nico, who also has a dead child sibling.
Just endless Tina Belcher moan. All right. Do we get any other emails?
So we did get one iTunes review, but for the integrity of our show, we can't really talk about it because it's very super spoilery.
Yeah, I actually didn't finish reading it because I was a little bit. I started seeing that it was hinting towards some stuff about characters and whatever, and I'm trying to sort of put my blinders on when it comes to that. So, yeah, Zach and I were talking, and then I think going forward, if you have like any like deep cut plot stuff to talk about as far as characters and how they're going to change and whatever, you could send that to the email instead of the iTunes, because Zach is the only one who mans the iTunes, so he can redact important information that might be spoilery to me, and that way reviews can just be reviews, and then conversations can be emails, so we could send multiple emails, and it could be more of like a dialogue.
It's hard to talk about when it comes to like reviews should be one thing and emails should be another thing. Like, I think emails are there for a reason. Like, we can actually like look at them and I can go through them because our whole purpose of our show is I've read them, B has not. Same as with iTunes reviews, you also have to be considerate of other people like looking for Percy Jackson content. Like, if you're like being spoilery in your iTunes reviews, and let's say so how the iTunes algorithm works is that the newest review will be the first one put up there. So if you have like a spoiler review like Percy Jackson becomes a guinea pig, like people that have not read Percy Jackson or very like early on in the books might get spoiled. So if you're going to do like a review, I mean, you could be overwhelmingly positive, you could be overwhelmingly negative. Just when you do a review, just be considerate of the people like reading these, because these are, we read them on the show because it's fun, but also they're there for the purpose of new listeners coming in, seeing if they will like the show or not.
That's true, yeah. So if you're finding like the Percy Jackson podcast as a companion to you reading it for the first time, we don't want people like accidentally, delving into spoiler territory. So like really anything that's like not pertinent to like, hey, I really like the show, blah, blah, blah. It's something like more vague. Anything kind of beyond that, delving into like the specifics of plot and how things change for different characters, I think should be kind of relegated to the emails. Especially because I'm trying to be completely spoiler-free. And so far, it's been pretty good. I haven't been really spoiled.
Yes, and I don't plan on spoiling you. And if you do get a spoiler, what we're going to do is we're going to put you in a bubble for the next year and a half. It's still 2020. And we'll just keep you there until it's time to get you out for the... I just imagine, like, for some reason, I have, like, the gigantic, like, ring of keys. Like, time to let B out for this week's episode. I've been so tired and lonely. No, B, I can't get you spoiled.
I was thinking more like you would have like a Men in Black kind of brain eraser thing, like, just kind of scan all that stuff out of there, wipe it squeaky clean.
Well, B, that'd be a problem though, because I don't want to like mess your brain up. Oh no, B forgot how to make quiche today.
My most important piece of knowledge, the sacred text.
Yeah. But regardless, thank you so much for that iTunes review. We don't want to be jerks. We don't want to be the bad cops about this. We just, when we look at stuff like this, it's just, we want to help benefit the community.
Yeah, we're worried about other people getting spoiled, or me getting spoiled, because I'm a dum-dum, and then I go and click on the iTunes reviews and go, wait, what did I read? I didn't read anything. What am I talking about? So
Same as with like apologies. I don't think we're going to read those on the show. Like when we do like a rebuttal, it's just, we read those personally. We don't want to like put someone on blast like that by having like an apology.
Right, like if we have a disagreement, like ideologically about the meaning of something that happens in this book or another book or whatever, like we don't, want it to be too contentious or anything like that, or like put anyone on blast, especially because we're the ones with the platform and you guys are listeners, and there's like kind of a discrepancy of like power there, and I just, I don't want that either.
It seems fair to do it that way, because there's nothing more embarrassing than you're having like a good day, like walking down the street, listening to your favorite podcast, and then all of a sudden you hear us talk about your apology, and like, oh, this is really awkward. Because I've had that before on podcasts where I've written into shows, and it can be awkward.
Yeah, you don't want that. So, I think that's kind of everything we wanted to say. That's all of our messages and emails and so forth, correct?
Yes, that is all that's there. So B, where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter and Instagram at bkellygorman, and you can find me on Tumblr at twinpoetry.tumblr.com.
If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Suda41. That's SUDA41. If you want to follow our show on Twitter, it's at halfblood_radio. If you want to email the show and email us any cool things, any things you loved, any things you hated, you can email us
any spoilery things that you just want to talk to Zach about, you can do that, I guess. Well, just leave me out of it.
I'll redact it. But I guess before we actually finish, I guess the disclaimer is I show everything to B. It's not like we don't withhold emails from each other. I just have to send them in like
you just black out parts that I can't see. Like some sort of FBI like hidden document.
Yeah, like I redact things. It's actually kind of funny. Like if you like look at the emails that we got, I should just post one up eventually for what they look like, where there's like be something that might be spoilery, where I start redacting. Like it used to be where like I was like redacting like title names for other series, but I'm like, whatever. That doesn't matter at that point. But yeah, so you can email us at radiocamphalfblood@gmail.com. And you can follow my new show, The Film Cultist, where this week I talked about Night Beast, a magical film by Don Dohler, which I love and it's great and has the best 20 minutes you'll ever find in a movie. Other than that, we have t-shirts available at TeePublic, so type in Radio Camp Half-Blood and you'll find us. We also have a Patreon/Radio Camp Half-Blood. We have those pins coming out hopefully soon. We're trying to ship them out by the end of June. So
end of June. Yep. So you're going to get me all those those addresses for the peoples. Yeah, so I would do that soon because I'm going to probably ship them all out at once. So like anybody who is a $10 and up donator will be getting those kind of all around the same time, depending on how far away they live from me. But yeah.
Yes, so make sure to get those things in because I have emailed every single one of you. So please give me a detailed address, what name you want, and pretty much how would you like it delivered, by teleportation or spaceship. Now it's going to be the U.S. Postal Service. That's the best way to do it. So,
and then I will appear down your chimney with my arm full of pins and hand you one.
So you better have those milk and cookies out for B.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You better watch out. You better watch out. You better watch out.
Oh no!
And you better not
spooky,
cry.
Scary. Well, B. I'm Zach.
I'm B.
Oh no, B's coming down my chimney. Oh no. I forgot the milk and cookies. 1 second. I gotta frantically get to the kitchen. Bye, guys.
But then B died, like in the Gremlins.
Oh no. What's that smell? It just, for some reason, Phoebe Kate like walks into my house. It was Christmas time. My friend
Dad?
B. No, she walks in. She's like, it was Christmas time. B really liked Christmas. They were my friends.
And they had a big bag full of pins.
Well, I'm Zach.
I'm B.
And keep staying mortal. Bye.
Bye, guys.